All right. Looks like we are up and running. Just doing a quick sound check, make sure all the settings and whatnot are good. We'll get everything flipped over to the jam stream layout, and we will go ahead and get started for today. All right, there we go. I'm going to take a look at my sound settings. I think everything is configured to when I was on Wazzy's stream for Mortuary Assistant. So I shouldn't need to change much, but I need to make sure all of the sounds and sound settings are good. So let me test a couple of the snares, since those tend to be the ones that peak the mic the most if I'm not careful. So let's see. The PF is probably the biggest offender there. Okay, I'll leave it there. It seems like my speaking volume is going to need to be a little bit closer to the mic when I'm talking, but I think all of the instrument stuff is okay. I can have people let me know if I need to tweak anything as we're going, but our settings should be good. So this is the first Beatbox Jam stream of 2023, which is kind of exciting. I think the last one we did was on New Year's Eve. Let me fix my mic here. And so with the new year of Beatbox Jam streams, we'll be talking about a lot of content and topics and things that we discussed last year and sort of building upon all of that. The point is for these to be kind of like an evolving series of discussions and things when talking about beatboxing. And while I'm kind of giving my intro and talking through some of the things I wanted to kind of set as goals, I'm just going to put on a beat I recorded real quick while we were getting everything loaded. We'll just put that in the background. That's what I may end up doing off stream when I have a spare minute for planning purposes on future jam streams, is taking a look at last year's archives and creating kind of a list of things that I know we touched on maybe consistently or throughout the different streams, as a way to kind of keep a running category or topic list of all things we talk about here on these streams, since usually I don't do a lot of planning whenever I do one of these. I don't sit down and write out scripts or lesson plans or anything like that. It's really meant to be a lot more off the cuff. And so knowing what we've discussed in the past, and especially for people who tune into these, if they have recurring topics or things they want to discuss from a technique or sound theory perspective, or even people who are just getting into beatboxing and wanting to learn about it, then I can kind of make a list of things I know have come up frequently and things that I said we would make sure and revisit in the future, and kind of use that to sort of inform how I structure these. Because again, it's not meant to be something really rigid and focused around any sort of lesson plan. That's not really why I do this. I do this just because I like talking about the kind of art form of beatboxing and introducing people to it, and also giving myself an excuse to focus on certain things for practicing purposes and to show kind of progression and how refining techniques in beatboxing works. Hey, Sour Lad's here. What's up, Sour Lad? Sour Lad says, finished watching the archive stream and other songs. Love the music you made. Ah, thanks, man. That's very kind. The Lost Kingdom project that Sour Lad is referring to, for folks who might see this later, was just released officially, technically Friday, but we had a release party on the 13th to timestamp this particular stream. And we got a chance to show off the animation that Wazzy made and the music I made as part of the overall project, and talk about the behind the scenes and development with all of the chat. And so I know some of the folks who were featured in the animation haven't seen it yet. I know Froggy was saying him and Banani are gonna watch it later because they're busy with some stuff this weekend. And so glad you enjoyed it, Sour Lad. The release stream itself was a lot of fun, just talking with Wazzy and Matt and Pwups about all things that went into the project and seeing everyone's kind of reaction to all the stuff. So it was a lot of work and definitely an interesting creative process, and I would do it again. I know Wazzy worked pretty hard on the animation. She probably had a more difficult job than me. But now that the Lost Kingdom project is done and out, we'll be moving on to the next thing. The next release I'm working on is nowhere near being completed, but I'm targeting a spring release date. March or April-ish is what I'm targeting, but it's going to depend on how long it takes me to, one, complete the tracks, and two, figure out what kind of presentation format I'm going to use. It's not going to be an animation. I don't really want to try and do that to Wazzy, but I do want to do some sort of collaborative art thing for the next project. I just don't really know what that's going to look like yet, but once I have kind of an idea, maybe when we get into within a month or so, when I plan to release that project, I can put some teaser stuff up like I did for Lost Kingdom. But I have some really, really interesting ideas for that next project. I know on maybe one or two of the jam streams, I've kind of previewed some prototype stuff from that upcoming project, but it is definitely something I'm going to be working on more, especially since it's a holiday here in the States tomorrow. I'm hoping to get in the studio and get a bunch of stuff recorded and start putting things in place for that project. Salad said best of luck. Yeah, it should be fun. This next one that I'm working on is going to be very different tonally from the one I just did. I kind of want to keep up with switching formulas and styles and experimenting around each time I do a major release of BGM stuff. And then in between those releases, we'll have things like the chat BGM tracks that we make here on these jam streams. And so the plan is to kind of have stuff alternating between major releases. I will say for the next one, the next chat BGM project won't be done by then. We don't have enough tracks. So that'll most likely be maybe a late summer in between release, like a BGM collection 3.0. And so my main focus is going into the next major regular BGM project. And I'm also working on some other stuff too, which you guys might find interesting. I think 2023 is going to be highly focused on music. I'm not saying I'm making it my sole focus, but a lot of things that I'm planning and trying to get in the works are going to be focused around the ideas of music and creating stuff. And so I think you folks will find it interesting. We can definitely talk about that more as we go. So for today, I'm going to do some warm-up, some drills, and whatnot, just to get the blood flowing, get everything warmed up. And then we'll move into kind of a basic discussion, sound theory, and then one thing I wanted to focus on today that I haven't talked about on beatboxing side for a while is routines. We've just discussed it before, and I figured it'd be a good time to circle back and talk about kind of the methodology and strategy for taking all these things we always discuss, these techniques and different components of the tool set, and what do you actually do with all that? Like, how do you put it together into something more cohesive that's not just a bunch of sounds or little snippets of sounds and patterns? How do you go from sound, technique, to patterns, to routines? And so we're going to talk about that today and build off of some previous stuff we've discussed. Well, with that said, let's turn this off. And I will run through some practice drills. And also let me know if I need to tweak anything with the sounds. I think we're pretty much dialed in. I need to not be right on top of the mic when I'm doing actual instrument noises. But I think all the settings should be good, but let me know, and I can always tweak stuff on the fly. So that let's do some warm up. I think we're back. Sorry about that. It looks like everything died mid practice. Edward says, "Bruh, what's up, Edward? Are we good? Everything on the broadcast look all right?" That was a brief hiccup with my router, which has been happening randomly more and more, and I haven't had the thing that long. Sorry, that's it. I hear a hiss static, huh? Were you hearing distortion or static when we first started? Because I haven't changed any settings, so it shouldn't be feedbacking at all. Let me look at my settings here. You get a check from Edward too. Is there something on the audio I need to tweak? Salad says, "No, you were fine before you died." All right, is it still doing it? I did a minor tweak on my EQ settings. What I can do is I can try and completely restart the stream, since I think my router came back up right when I tried to reinitiate the stream. But yeah, let me know if you're still hearing that, and I'll try just completely restarting OBS, and we'll see if that fixes it. I haven't changed anything. All my sound settings are the same. Edward says, "It happens when you talk. It's quiet though." Okay. Let me take a look. How about now? If I drop it a little bit, how's it sound when I talk now? If I just talk normally, don't make any sounds, drop the EQ a little bit. Let me know if that sounds better, and we'll leave it there for the rest of the stream, because we shouldn't be getting any sort of audio feedback when I talk. I can adjust my mic sensitivity a little bit, but yeah, let me know if that fixed it. I have my monitor, my audio monitor turned up pretty decently high, and unless I just crank it, I can't hear any sort of feedback through my headphones. So let me know, folks, if that fixed the problem. I definitely don't want it to be fuzzy on the actual broadcast. Okay, but in the meantime, let's switch topics here, and we'll keep troubleshooting as we go. I don't know why my internet died. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. All right. So moving on to the discussion on basics, and this will be kind of like the technique sound theory part of the discussion. and having everything get reset sort of threw my train of thought off. And so I did want to sort of revisit a little bit with the things we've talked about previously when it comes to the basics part of beatboxing. I know in kind of across the last several streams we've been talking about for people getting into beatboxing and wanting to learn where you sort of start focusing on as far as the individual instruments, your kind of starter set when it comes to the big greater toolkit for beatboxing and beatbox technique. And we did talk about how to sort of establish the core components, the kind of simple basics of, a drum set. You have like your kick, your hat, snare, and kind of where people initially put their focus, usually from what I've seen and talking to other people, it's usually the type of snare that they want to focus on first. Most people listen to other beatboxers when they're learning and they say, hey, so and so did a really cool snare for this one routine or pattern. I want to learn that one, and then that's what I'm going to kind of focus on until I get that. And then once I get decent at it, feel like I've mastered or learned the technique, then move on to another one. And that's definitely the way I started. When I was first starting out, I saw a lot of beatbox kind of footage and videos before I decided to actually try and learn it myself. And I don't remember which one specifically. I don't think I started with the BGM, which is definitely not the easiest snare to learn with. I would not recommend people start with that one. I think, like we had talked about before, it was the K snare, because the outwards K rather, since most people, depending on what language you speak, are pretty familiar with doing a non-vocalized K sound. And I did want to sort of revisit that a little bit since it's been part of the discussion for a couple of these streams now. And so a regular unvocalized K sound that evolves into the actual snare is just saying K without the A. And that's how you're getting a. And if you really focus on developing that sound for a while, you can get it sharp. There are people, I think, in the pro side whose K snares are just a really sharp, evolved, clean version of the sound. And so if you slot that into just a regular beat in as a snare, you might get something like. And my regular K snare outwards is not terribly strong. I don't practice it that way super often because it's not kind of my default anymore. But when you're learning, you could start with something as simple as that and get really good at it, and then work on kind of evolving that kind of simple technique into the more forceful outwards K that I do. And we talked a bit about that one last time, and I can revisit the technique if people who are learning want to hear it. But my outwards K that I uses a bit more mouth pressure and the tongue, more parts of the tongue than just the back that's creating the sound. And so it goes from a to a. And I don't really know if there's a difference in terminology because I've never talked to any of the pros about that particular type of technique. I, for the longest time, was doing all of my outwards Ks using that tongue pressure method, and it's very similar, but I like the way it sounds better because it's more forceful. You get much more of a punchy, sharp hit with the than the. And I wouldn't say it's better or worse, it's just different. But it's easier to manipulate the sound on the outward K the way I do it, because by changing the position of your mouth, either widening your mouth into like a grin or kind of closing your mouth a little bit, it changes the way that sound hits. So it might go from a to a, goes up in pitch a little bit and gets a little bit sharper, or you can kind of drop it down a little bit too and go from a to a. And that's just me making like an O shape with my mouth while doing the K sound, and you can hear it drop in pitch. It sounds more like a ko, similar to like the ko technicality sound. And another other variant that I'm pretty sure I mentioned last time we were talking about the case snares is the closed mouth muffled case snare, which is really fun. I use that one every once in a while in different patterns and routines, and that's done using the same, but you just close your mouth, and it becomes filtered and muffled. And it sounds like, and things I've done in patterns and routines before, where you start with the closed mouth muffled snare, and then you sort of open it up so it sounds like the filter is being kind of toned down on an effect knob, and you might get some like, and then you go back down. And I think it was a drum and bass routine that I used that for. We did something like, and you could hear it kind of go from being a filtered, muffled sound gradually, then just by opening up the mouth, you're unmuting it or unmuffling it, and it becomes just the regular one. And you can use that as kind of like a progression thing, or like I said, an effect. And so, going back to the topic of basics, picking a snare and getting good with it is probably what I would recommend to people when it comes to figuring out where you're going to go. I know last time we talked about this on a jam stream, we talked about another one of the quote unquote beginner or early level snares. One that I did spend a lot of time with in the beginning when I wasn't just working on the Ks, and that was the PF. The and that one I think is also mechanically one of the more easy ones to do. You just have to figure out the easiest way for your mouth and lip anatomy to get used to putting the P sound, the p, or a B sound, the B or P really works. So you take like the p sound and a f sound like an F, and just putting them together and trying to say them at the same time. So instead of p, you're putting them together, and then even closer together, you get, and that one, it's just getting used to the timing and figuring out how to do it at the same time. You don't have to do any sort of fancy tongue or lip mechanics to do that. It's just putting the two sounds together, and instead of going puff, you're saying puff, and then puff. And then over time, the sharpness and accuracy of the PF snare is what improves. It's a little bit kind of messy in the beginning because you're trying to get used to putting those two sounds together. But after you've been practicing it for a bit, you kind of refine how it hits, and you can change the way that snare hits. Normally, the would be like an unmuted drum set snare. I think that's what that is. I don't actually play drums on a drum set. But if you open your jaw and relax your mouth a little bit when you're doing the PF, you can drop the pitch of it, and you get what I call like a low PF snare. And you can do it with mouth pressure and not have to breathe, which is what makes it kind of neat. So instead of a, which is much more forceful when you're using your lungs, a low pitch PF snare would sound like, it sounds more dull, and the audio pitch for the note, or the note of the snare, if you will, is lower, and it's not quite as forceful because you're just using your mouth. So it goes from to, and that one's fun because it's easier to combine with hummed notes if you wanted to do something like a simultaneous hummed melody and a snare at the same time, which you can't really do if you're doing the forceful breath PF. And so if you're doing something like, if you're doing it with the forceful PF snare where you have to breathe, it would be broken up because you're having to breathe to do the actual snare hit. And that would sound like, and so part of the practice of the simultaneous notes is learning how to amplify the sounds of the mouth pressure ones. So the getting that stronger so that if you're doing it in conjunction with a hummed note, it sounds louder. And that's something I'm practicing. I'm not super good at it. I'm a little bit better at doing the throat or vibration based hum notes because they're a bit more forceful. and I don't have to kind of balance the airflow as much. But another thing that people, if you want to learn a cool party trick for some kind of basic beatbox stuff, if you know how to hum, which is just taking a sung note and pushing it all the way through your nose and not having it come out of your mouth at all. This would be a slight sidebar for technique. If you think about just going with your mouth closed, and you force the sound to come all the way out of your nose because your mouth is closed, it can't go anywhere else. You take that and then learn how to open your mouth and keep the note from switching and coming out of your mouth. Let me see if I can illustrate this. It's a little bit difficult when I'm on audio only for this. But if I go with my mouth closed, I'm going to open my mouth and try not to change the sound where the sound's coming out of. And you shouldn't be able to tell on the audio unless it's very, very, very faint difference in sound just from me opening my mouth. And so you have something like and that slight popping noise, I did that purposefully to show when I'm opening and closing my mouth. But the actual hummed note isn't changing because it's all coming out of my nose the entire time. And so the kind of neat trick I wanted to show is if you can do a kick and a hummed note and a click, you can do all of those at the same time by just forcing the sound out of your nose and everything else coming out of your mouth. Because the click that doesn't use any sort of mouth pressure or air pressure or lungs, it's just tongue. The only thing your mouth needs to do is make the kick. So if you take the hum note, the and add just a non-breath P or B sound for the kick, mine's going to be kind of faint because mine don't have a lot of force behind them because I'm still practicing that. But if you take the and add a kick, it comes mine kind of sounds like a that's okay. For the sake of the illustration, it's fine. And then you add in a click, you might get something like and you're kind of driven by how much air pressure or how much air you have in your lungs, but you're doing all of these sounds mostly simultaneously. And the big trick is the hummed note, which is like the bass line of that example, doesn't have breaks, and that's what you practice. And so you can even take the kick out and make it simpler. If you want to say, hey, here's a thing I learned in beatboxing, you just combine the hum with a click and maybe with some tongue hats, like a, and you take the kick completely out, so it's kind of like an emptier beat when like a bass kick drops out in a beat. You might get something like and obviously if you're practicing this technique and trying to get more complex, you wouldn't make just one note, because while that is impressive that you can kind of do those at the same time, if you make it into a melody, then someone's ear is going to pick up on that and they're going to say, oh wait, how are you doing all those at the same time without breathing? And so you could do something really simple, like just changing like an upwards or downwards progression of that hum note. Again, I'm not doing any sort of throat or bass distortion at all. I'm just humming. And so you might get something like and again, that's a real simple and kind of messy example, but it's just combining the hum note with some sounds that are in a different part of your mouth, and you put them together really easily. You kind of turn up the complexity into incorporating other techniques, and this is kind of the basics evolution discussion I wanted to focus on, from taking all these ideas of, okay, sounds coming from here, so I can add in sounds elsewhere and kind of put everything together. You start incorporating things like throat bass or vibration bass, and then combining that with other types of snares, but you're using the same principles of, okay, sound's got to come here out of my nose. I'm going to use the rest of my mouth real estate to do all these other things. And we take that previous example with just the empty hummed note and the click snare, and we switch things around a little bit and make it more complex, we might get something that uses a more distorted bass and then all those ideas together with a K snare, for example, an outwards K. And so you might get something like and I'm not going to just go into a complete tangent with the pattern, but you're trying to get everything as seamless as possible. And I'm still, again, it's something I'm working on because it's a little bit difficult to master, easy in concept, but takes a lot of practice. And so you start saying, okay, I'm going to put all these things together and form that into an actual cohesive pattern, and then from there a routine. And so that's kind of our segue into the discussion about routines. So I'm gonna add that to the topic because I still think there's relevant stuff with the sound theory and basics we can kind of weave in and talk about with all this, and not just be a sole like routine discussion. It's kind of going to be putting all these things together to apply them. And so first off, to kind of recap terminology when it comes to beatboxing, what's the difference between a technique, a pattern, and a routine, right? A technique is the sound. It's the sound or act of generating a sound in beatboxing. It's essentially an instrument. That's the technique. So a snare, a kick, a bass note type, a lip roll. That's the technique. A pattern is multiple techniques / sounds put together into a set. And so that could be something like a chunk of a rhythm. It could be a technicality set. It could literally be anything that's put together into a string of sounds, as opposed to just sound, 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 sound. It's sounds put together. So a good example of what might be a pattern would be just a constant rhythm for a song. You know, this is the that in itself could be a pattern. And how complex or simple you make it just depends. Hey, Crusher's here. Crusher has redeemed Drop a Beat. Oh, okay. I did make sure and turn the redeems on, folks. I think until the next co-host stream I do, the Drop a Beat and the Fact redeems will be on. Crusher says, hello, sorry, I just got back from the bar. Oh, you don't have to apologize, Crusher. I'm glad you're here with us today. We spent some time talking about basics, and we're kind of segueing into the idea of taking basics, creating patterns, and using them to create routines. My stream died about 20 minutes ago. My router just decided to crap out. And so I think the archive is going to be fragmented because I had to restart the stream. But we're still talking about all of the beatbox sound theory and whatnot. So feel free to drop any questions you might have. I don't know how your progress has been going with your case snares, but hopefully you've been grinding. But yeah, so talking about the idea of patterns, and patterns are sound sets strung together and built for complexity and tailored towards, you know, whatever it is you're trying to do. And then the third category that we want to talk about is a routine. So if we have techniques are the sounds or instruments, patterns are putting those instruments into chains and structures. A routine is taking all the patterns and putting them into a full-blown song with progression and sections and whatnot. And I don't think it's a universal term of a routine has to be X level of complexity or has to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But the end goal of a routine is it's a rehearsed song. And so your planned patterns and how you put everything together, all that culminates in the routine. And so a routine is composed of patterns that are put together in a sense that they're going to be performed. And then for working backwards to the terminology here, and then the techniques or sounds are what compose the pattern. And so I guess we can kind of demonstrate because Crusher redeemed Drop a Beat. Oh, and Snake is here. Snake redeemed Hydrate. What's up, Snake? How you doing today? Hope your Sunday. I hope your Sunday is going well. And so here's what we'll do. I'm going to use Crusher's Redeem as kind of an illustration of what I'm talking about, and I'm going to do it in kind of phases. And so if we take the idea of patterns, and I'll let you know when I'm actually considering this the beat drop redeem, because I don't want to waste Crusher's points. So patterns. If we were thinking about maybe like a dubstep-ish, kind of a heavy bass pattern, something that went like, this is just an example. I'll explain what I'm doing in a second. The pattern might be something like a dubstep-ish type beat, some that went like, and if we're putting a bass with it, we got to figure out if it's going to be like a heavy bass, how it's going to move and everything else, and structure that. Just think of it like tracks in sheet music or in an audio program, different instrumental tracks and whatnot, and you're putting it all together to create the actual song. But then you have to have an intro. You have to decide if you want to do drops. You have to decide if you want to change up things in the tempo. And then again, it's constructing a song out of sections of patterns and sounds, and then that's the routine. All right. And so here's how we're going to demonstrate it. I'm going to do a prototype of one that I haven't quite fully finished as far as writing out, but I in my head performed it the same way, so it's more or less what it sounds like. Maybe you folks can tell me if you think this would be a fun thing to do for channel points. I was considering putting 1 or 2 redeems into the channel point list that are going to be high, that maybe be like 5,000 points, but on redeem, instead of just freestyle a beat for a few bars, it would be do an actual routine. So a song start to finish, as opposed to just a random freestyle beat. And the redeem would be tailored towards specific routines, because I have several, and this would force me to actually be consistent with them. But it would be like, routine 1, X name, and that would be the 5,000 point redeem with a high cooldown. And it'd be kind of like a once a stream type of redeem if people want to do that. And then every time someone redeems that, I have to actually perform that routine. I can't just freestyle something or whatever. I might be able to tweak things, but it's got to be that particular one. And then maybe every once in a while I cycle out the routines so that, maybe after a couple months I put a couple new ones in there. And so if people redeem that, I got to do a different one. And so if that sounds like something you guys want, I can think about that and maybe write a list of what I want to put and then drop 2 in there. So just let me know. Just an idea. It's something I was thinking about over the last couple days. All right, so I know I'm stalling a little bit. We have to do the redeem, but this is going to be a prototype version of a routine that I've been working on for a bit. Haven't come back to it in a while, but I don't know, what do I even call this one? I think this one's called Xeno, like Xeno, like an alien. And so I'll do the thing from start to finish and then kind of talk about the actual routine, applying all the stuff we talked about up till now as far as different terminologies and parts. And so let's do it. This one is for Crusher's Drop a Beat. Tell you where I'm from, and where I've been. Look to the stars, when I flow like an alien. When I flow like an alien. Alien. break. Speed it up. You know what I should probably do? I should probably snip out every time I do one of these routines for the first time and then just keep that in an archive somewhere so I can remember exactly what I did, because I've probably changed the middle and end of that particular routine a couple times, but you know, more or less that's what it's supposed to sound like. Now, next time I do it, people need to keep me honest and say, "Hey, wait a minute, you changed the entire song. It should, it should be like last time." I will say that the intro with the spoken parts, that has never changed. It always has that particular intro with those 4 bars. And I guess I could probably write notes. Maybe I should do that. And maybe I'll start with a routine list, as there's a few. So anyway, going back to the lesson, and I did see that Snake redeemed a hydrate up there too, so I will drink some more of my water. Crusher says, "Damn, Raku, that was fire." Oh, thanks, Crusher. Hopefully you don't mind me using your redeem to kind of illustrate the lesson and stuff we're talking about here. But taking the idea of a routine. So the way I kind of do it, I'm not a trained musician, and I don't know if pros do it this way, but I tend to do my routines by breaking it up into like a start, middle, and end as far as how I'm trying to put the routine together, right? So an intro, is there going to be something like spoken bits in the intro? I've done that on a few, and I try not to do the same kind of structure, or if I'm doing like a rapped part. That's essentially what that was, right? I don't want to do the exact same cadence or flow every single time, and I have a couple that start that way. And so, what's the intro going to be? And then from the intro, kind of connected to that, what's the genre song going to be? Is it going to be something heavy like a dubstep? So we have to think about build-ups and drops. Is it going to be more hip-hop-ish? Is it going to be, more of a down-tempo type of beat? Or if it's going to be something completely on the other side of the genre spectrum, is it going to be like a bossa nova type beat, like the Super Bossa Nova BGM track, which I occasionally do every once in a while. And so how do you intro, segue into the main part of the song, transitions or changes in tempos and styles or anything in the middle, and then how are you going to outro? Is it going to lead up to kind of one big drop or complex thing at the end, or are you going to do more of like a fade out when it comes to just kind of slowly tapering off volume, or do you want it to be abrupt? And so that's kind of the planning of structuring the routine. And I think in addition to the intro and all the other stuff, the first thing I think is style. What kind of style song do I want it to be? A lot of the stuff that I've written and put together as routines tend to be heavy and have drops. I don't want to get into the habit of only doing that, because it would be boring and be monotonous. Every time I did a routine, people are going to say, "Oh, wait a minute, it's just going to be another heavy drop, dubstep adjacent type thing with something heavy and then, whatever." I don't want to do that. And so I've been trying to kind of put together several different types of routines that have different styles and show off different instruments. And it doesn't need to be complex necessarily, but the point is to have some variety. So if someone at a party, not that I go to parties, but if I'm ever out and someone says, "Hey, I heard you beatbox, show us something," instead of being able to say, "Okay, well, I'm just going to freestyle something real quick," and, that can be fine and impressive. If I have routines in the memory bank they can say, okay, here's a routine I have, and if it's even modeled after something people know, then people will usually be more impressed by that. Because someone who doesn't know beatbox technique probably isn't going to realize that doing something like a high speed technicality pattern, like a is hard to do. They're gonna say, "Oh, that was kind of weird and fast. That was something I've never seen before," but they wouldn't know that it's supposed to be hard. Versus if we're talking about before, where you were just layering simple things together and something like that might impress people more just because it seems more hard and impossible to do. And so it's kind of a push and pull. But when it comes to things that people recognize, I do have one that I think I first mentioned this one when I first started streaming way back. I showed a prototype version of it off and just never revisited ever again because I'm really bad at keeping track of everything I do. But I want to show this one off because I would put this one as part of the redeem list. Maybe this one and Xeno if I can refine Xeno a little bit. But this one is probably going to be something that if someone said, hey, I want to see you do something cool in beatboxing, not just do like some random beats or some sounds. Show me something cool. This is probably one I would use because it's recognizable, I think. So I'm going to do it. This will be the second routine I show off today. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but this is an example that kind of contrasts with the other one style-wise and I guess reference-wise. So this will be the first time doing the full thing on stream. So let's give it a try. I don't need to worry about levels or effects. This one's called Quest Incompletable, and you might know why if you hear it. So let's do it. Oh boy, my voice is getting tired. Crusher says, very on the precipice of defeat from Bleach. Also very Final Fantasy VII. I haven't played Final Fantasy VII, if you can believe it. But The reason why I think that one it would be fun and recognizable is, and it might not have been super clear because again, my throat's getting a little tired from talking and doing all the stuff we've done so far. But that whole thing is basically like a sample of the Mission Impossible theme, and it's a kind of remixed version of the Mission Impossible theme they've done throughout the years, and it takes a little bit of elements from I think Take a Look Around, the remix cover Limp Bizkit did, but mostly, the Mission Impossible theme. Most people have heard that before if they've seen movies, and so it takes that and takes that bass line riff and turns it into kind of a electronic type sound, and then it switches up to like a drum and bass bit towards the end, and then whatnot. It's a fun one to do, and so that one and Xeno might be the two that I put in for redeems. I'll think about it. Maybe we pilot that for a bit and see how it works out, because I think it'd be kind of a fun way to force me to practice more on my routines. But yeah, hopefully that was amusing to you folks. All right. So let's see. I guess we can see if there's any immediate questions on either basics, sound technique, and pattern slash routine construction. I kind of talked through the stuff I wanted to talk about, but before we move on and switch gears to doing BGM stuff, which I would like to do for the remainder of the stream, I can open it up since I know folks have jumped on since we started, and again I had to reset the stream because my internet sucks apparently. But if people have any questions, we can talk through them, or you can feel free to drop them as we're moving on to. It doesn't have to just be now. Maybe another challenge we can potentially think about in the future might be, a chat based challenge where you folks have to choose components of a routine for me to construct, and then we do it on one stream where we say, hey, okay, we're gonna do the challenge. Everybody contribute things that are gonna say, okay, style, instruments, and whatnot for a routine, and then between that stream and the next one, I've got to actually write it, construct it, and then bring it back like a homework assignment to present to the class later and say, all right, maybe we write it down and say, okay, challenge one, it's got to have instrument A, B, C, D, E, F, G, be this style and whatnot, and then bring it back, and then you guys grade me and say, you accomplished it, or you missed things and you need to do these things or whatnot. That might be an idea too. Like a chat routine challenge is what I would call it, where you basically tell me what to create and I've got to go and actually do that. So that could be something to think about as well. Because I do want to try and mix up what we do on the jam streams, not just be me kind of lecturing all the time, but also making interactive with the folks that tune in as far as things you guys can participate with and kind of be part of the whole discussion. And so we'll kind of file that as a potential idea, and you guys can give me feedback on that if you think that'd be something you'd find fun. But let's switch gears and move over to BGM. And then again, questions are welcome at any time. Feel free to stop me at any point. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. So let's say BGM brainstorming. Crusher says, I like your lectures. Feels like I'm learning something. Well, that's good. Again, the point of these jam streams wasn't meant for like a lecturing and teaching forum, because I'm not a pro, so I don't really feel qualified to teach. These jam streams are a way for me to talk about beatbox technique and kind of share with everybody things I've learned and things I'm interested in, while also giving you folks the opportunity to learn as well, and then kind of bounce off each other. Because I'm sure if pros out there in the scene, like the big names, saw this stream and they heard me say, I feel like I'm qualified to teach people, they would probably say, I don't know who this rando is. He's a VTuber. He might not even be actually beatboxing. And so it's more of a thing for all of us as a community as opposed to like a service for people. But if you're learning something and it gets you interested in beatboxing, that's what matters. I don't do this for any sort of personal benefit other than It forces me to learn this stuff better, and I just like talking about it. You folks probably know me well enough by now. I can talk endlessly on things I care about and I'm interested in. And if we can make that something that is interactive and fun for everybody to kind of learn, then even better. That's icing on top of the cake. All right, so let me get my chair, let me adjust my mic, and we will jump into some BGM brainstorming. Oh, it feels good to sit down. All right. So let me do a real quick sound check on levels for the loop. This is the real simple beat I recorded earlier just to have some background noise when I was talking. Okay, I'll clear that off. And so let's see how many we can get through today. I'm on a little bit less of a schedule. That's why I wanted to do the jam stream today. Obviously, yesterday was the release party. And so today we're again not on a schedule, so let's see how many tracks and things we can get through. Crusher says, those people, I'd say, hey, this guy has taught me so much, and I like his progression and routines, and don't worry about what those guys are saying, because my man, my dude, my guy, you are fire. Oh, thanks, Crusher. I appreciate that, but at the same time, it's fine. You know, this whole project, this whole thing that we do is just designed to create stuff that people find interesting. You know, I don't do this for financial benefit or to make money or to get famous. If I did that, I probably wouldn't be a VTuber. I'd be like a hot tub streamer or something. But like we've talked about before on the other types of streams I do, I'm a very creative minded person, and I need an outlet to be able to make things. And the VTuber project that you all see is the first time I've ever done that with a community. I've made tons of stuff on the internet for a long time, but it was never really public or intended to be public with like interactivity and community. And I wanted to do that and give it a try. So that's why this whole project came into being, to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit. And at the risk of sounding sappy, again, I got lucky last year and when I started the year before in VTubing. I got lucky that I met someone who introduced me to their own community, and people decided to pop over here and hang out. I see we got a stretch from Sour Lad. Oh, my back. And so anyway, the rambling end result is I like to make stuff, and this is the first time I've made stuff that I can share with people. And if people dig it, that's great. If people don't dig it, then that's great too. There's nothing wrong. I don't expect people to vibe with every single thing I do. It's just a place for me to make stuff and put it out there. Crutcher says, I'm grateful you did, and as far as what I saw of your Lost Kingdom, I loved it, and I love your rambling. Well, that's good. If I had really unappealing or boring or even offensive rambling, I probably would have no sort of content creation career. But yeah, I'm glad you were able to check out the... That keeps happening. I'm gonna have to buy a new router. This one I have is not even a couple years old. All right, let's make sure everything gets reloaded and is back up. Starlad says, Tinkerton is living in your router, Raku. I guess. I swear I've had this thing less than 2 years. But it has been doing that sporadically. This is the first time in a really long time I've had my connection just flat out die during stream. But let me know if anything is funky with the broadcast. Hopefully that distortion we talked about on the audio earlier is gone. But that is annoying, but I think we're back. Archive broadcasts are going to look really weird for this stream. I might have to just upload 4 parts each time it goes down and I have to restart. That's fine. It'll just be part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Or maybe for the sake of YouTube and the stream archives, I can download all the parts and I'll edit them together or something like that. That might be cleaner. I don't have to do 4 uploads. But anyway, what I was doing right before everything decided to die on me, I was looking at the last BGM track we did on the previous stream. And so let me start it up again, make sure everything is good. Okay, so that one was definitely kind of more of a hip hop-ish, more kind of ambient, it kind of beat. I don't know what genre you would consider that. Some sort of ambient electronic type beat. I want to do something that's got a little bit more of a driving force behind it and still electronic. Kirsch says, I can hear you. Okay, good. Fingers crossed. Hopefully that's the last time that happens this stream because that's super obnoxious. It means I have to do more editing later. So let's switch back to the blank track I saved. And so let's do something that's got maybe kind of more of a consistent instead of a galloping rhythm and beat to it. So maybe something that sounds like maybe let's do the kick first. I gotta think because there's some other tracks I've done that have a similar rhythm and style, and I don't want to just duplicate something we've done in the past. So maybe we do a longer rhythm instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, and that repeats. Maybe we do we add a triple. That's one thing I've wanted to do. So maybe do 2 repeats and then triple. Let's see if we can get to record. Okay. Rhythm-wise, that's fine. Let's see if we can get the loop to be a little bit more seamless. And then what we're going to do is we're going to overdub the different parts of the rhythm on top of the kicks instead of doing just the rhythm all at once. Well, maybe we can add a bit of reverb to the bass kick and give it a little bit of an echo. And also, let me know if that weird feedback is back at any point. I think we're good. All right, reverb. Add a little bit. I don't want to echo too much. All right. Let's try that. Okay. I think that's a consistent kick line. Now we could do offbeat hats. Again, kind of generic techno-ish type beat, and then we'll see what we can play around with to kind of flesh it out some more. Maybe something like and we're not going to have the hats match the triple kick at the end. They're going to stay on the offbeats the whole time. Okay, then we have the hats layered in. Because I'm going to do that over again. At the very last hat, I think is off by a half or maybe even a quarter beat. It's slightly off, and I think it's because of the triplets. So let me try and fix that. There we go, that's better. Now we could add a throat kick or a lower bass kick underneath the regular bass drum kick to give it more punch, more of a lower register forceful kick. So that's gonna be a challenge because that means I'm gonna have to do a throat kick that's completely in line with everything so far. But if I move my mic a little, do something like. I gotta remember not to do 3 at the end. We can even go guitar to bass to give more punch, and then I'll have to get quite as close to the mic. So let's see if we can do that. All right, let's turn my mic back on. So I don't know how much that picks up just on the stream audio itself, but there's definitely more of a thump behind the kick. Almost sounds like a heartbeat. And that was just turning guitar to bass on about 30%. And then doing throat kicks just to... Let me check something real quick. Next thing we're going to want to do is a snare. I got to think a little bit about what I want to do for snares. All right, so what do we want for a snare? We want to try and do a PF. Hold on, let's save our work first and go back to the other track again real quick and see what snare I used. Maybe we do BGM for this one. I gotta be a little bit more careful about blasting the input on the snare. But maybe we can do that. Let's see what we did before on the last one. Crutcher says, I'm still experimenting with K snares, trying to find that right sound. Oh, okay. Do you feel like you're zeroing in on kind of the sharpness? Does it seem like it's kind of evolving? As it might not seem like it from day to day, but if you practice consistently for, a little bit every day and you check your progress after a week, it's usually easier to see how things have evolved depending on the technique. But good. I hope that's going well. Okay. So we used an outwards K snare on the previous one. So maybe we go BGM on this one. That might be interesting. Crusher says, yeah, it's that sharpness that eludes me. Okay, so we could sidebar for a little bit since I was curious to see how your progress was going. So you're doing outwards K snares, right? Are you doing it with just the K sound, like a, or are you trying to do like the pressure higher intensity K snare? Okay, all right. Were you able to try the variant technique I talked about? This was like, I think the last stream might have come up. But we're able to try the tongue variant where you put your tongue in the way and then use the pressure of the K sound to come basically from the corners of the tongue to get more of a forceful push. Because the difference is it goes from a to a, and I think that this is one that I use is more useful because it's stronger. So if you can get the sound to actually come out, then it's just practicing. It's practicing to get that sharpness, because when I first started doing it was not that sharp. I've been doing it for a couple years now. Crutcher says, yeah, the tongue definitely adds a little sharpness. Yeah, so one pointer that might help you when you are taking the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth and then doing the K sound, try and pop it more and push the pressure. It's a little bit difficult to describe, but if you think about having your tongue in the way and you do a K sound, it would sound like, it would just sound kind of like it's muted. But try and seal your tongue more and then use that pressure to pop it instead of just doing it with the tongue in the way. Kind of create more of a pressure and then push it out at once in like a burst. So instead of just try and seal your tongue first and then push it and force it to pop. And then if you do that, it's probably going to improve the sharpness a little and go from just a to a. Because the way I do the technique, it's actually sealing very briefly because I do it so quickly now, but it's sealing the tongue and then popping it first. So if you try and do that, that might give you that punch. And you can practice just sealing your tongue against the roof of your mouth first. And if you do that, you shouldn't be able to exhale at all. And that's how you know it's blocked. So I'm not gonna be able to talk when I do it, but if I block my mouth airway completely with my tongue by putting it up to the top of the mouth and then popping it from that seal, that's the difference. Because there's no seal. You're just using the back of your tongue to create the K sound. But if you create a seal and then push it using like the K noise type of movement, that's how it goes from to. And then just practice getting comfortable doing that sealing and popping quickly. So it's just then instead of just, you start doing a little bit faster and then get comfortable doing that. And then eventually you can do it even more quickly and rapidly in succession. And then it goes from just a to a. And if you really want to get wacky with it, you combine it with the zip and a kick for that technicality zip kick run with the K snare. That sounds like, that's a little bit more advanced. Don't worry about that. But yeah, let me know if that makes a difference, because it changes the way the snare works. It's not just it's adding a little bit of mouth pressure to go from to, and it's much stronger. And that's one of my favorites. I've been doing that for a long time before I realized I was doing it differently from everybody. So yeah, try experimenting around with that, Crusher, and see if it helps give you that sharpness. And realistically, if you can get that outwards K mechanic down and get comfortable with doing it, it's going to give you a little bit of a leg up on learning the inwards K, which that is the number one first beginner wall of beatboxing, is learning inwards K. But by learning about the tongue sealing and pressure stuff from the outwards, it's going to be a little bit easier to do the inwards. But maybe in the future we can break down inwards K. That one's hard. I'm not going to lie. It took me a little bit to get that one until I watched a tutorial that taught it to me in a way that made sense. And so if I were to teach other people that particular type of snare, inwards K sounds like, I'd probably try and present it at least two different ways to people and see which one makes more sense to them, because it's a highly irregular type of movement, but it does use that sealing technique. So if you can figure that out and get good with it, it'll probably help you later. I would recommend for people getting into beatboxing that they focus on the outward ones first, and then once they get comfortable with, like, a PF, outwards K, or even like a BGM, then kind of branch into inwards K, because again, it's different from all of the outward ones mechanically, and it's a little bit harder to explain. But I'm confident that anybody who's watching this can learn it. It just takes a little bit of experimenting around to get that inwards one. Crutcher says, it was a ceiling I was missing. I think I like how it sounds. Now it's helping me improve a lot. Thanks. Oh, no worries. Again, a lot of it's practice. The sound's not going to sound super sharp and crisp right off the bat, but I guarantee you, if you just practice it a lot and then slot it into the other beatboxing stuff that you're learning, it will improve over time. I could probably go pull up my first year of streaming jam streams and hear some differences in my instruments between, then and almost 2 years later. Might not be dramatic, but since I've been practicing, things should be better, right? They shouldn't get worse. Crusher says, yeah, as an autistic person, it's hard to learn things the right way because of how my brain stores information. It's different than non-autistic people, but my beatboxing has improved drastically since I started watching your jam streams. Oh, that's good. I understand that I'm not an autistic person myself, so I'm not really qualified to speak on the brain portions, but I know from knowing other autistic people that it's just a different wiring as far as how you learn, process information, and everything else. And so as someone who wants to be able to teach people things and explain things that people can learn, whenever people tune in and are interested in things we talk about, it is one of my high priorities to try and say, okay, if I explain it this way, but anybody, doesn't matter if you're autistic or not, if it doesn't make sense to people in this way, how do we change things around and try and approach it from a different strategy that's going to make sense? Because that's how I learned beatboxing. There are many techniques that took me forever to learn because I was only watching one person explain it, one tutorial, and I said, this must just be the be-all, end-all of learning a technique. Well, I did some more research and found out lots of people teach things differently, and lo and behold, someone else taught the technique in a different way, and it clicked for me. Inward bass is the good example for that. The way I've seen people teach inward bass in the vast majority of tutorials did not work for me because I was trying to learn it for like 2 years. And then I can't remember, was it Kindo? I've seen his tutorials before. Somebody out in the pro scene just explained it to me differently, and that's what got it to click. And it was that inward singing technique. No one else really teaches it that way. Everyone else teaches it kind of like doing a vocalized chest bass, but inwards. That was definitely not clicking for me, and I could not get it to actually come out. But when someone said, just take the inward singing note, if you know how to sing, and then start dropping it lower and lower until you start to get resonation and distortion, that's how I actually got the sound to come out. And again, I probably would have learned it a lot faster if I just tried to find more different ways of explaining the same thing. And so I'll do my best whenever we talk through techniques and whatnot to explain it in more than one way, just so people can see what works for them. And I rely on all of you folks in the chat to tell me, hey, I'm giving it a try, not clicking. Can you explain it in a different way? And I will do my best to do that, because that's how you learn. You have to approach things from different angles and figure out what works for you. And everyone's going to be a little bit different. But yeah, good. I hope you keep practicing and progressing with your techniques, Crusher. once you start working through the basic snares and sounds, you can tackle technicality. Technicality is fun. Once you get into that, it is so much room for creativity and experimenting around. That's one of my most favorite components of beatbox technique, is just messing around with sound sets. So I'm sure you'll get there. All right. Let's get back to the beat. So what we've got here is a pretty consistent 4/4 with a triple at the end. So what I was saying as we were messing around with snares is we could try and do a BGM, a spit snare, which is going to sound like a clap. Now, we could try and put a distortion filter over it to kind of change the sound, which might be fun. Let me see what that sounds like if I throw one of the pass filters over it and see how it changes the snare hit, because it's going to muffle and distort it a lot. I know that it does that for BGM snares. So let's try it. And then we'll slot it in, see what it sounds like, and we can always undo it if we don't like it. That's not bad. If there was a little less variation on the distortion, I think it would be a little bit better. So let me try and turn the filter down to like 45% and then re-record it and see if that sounds better. Well, that's me forgetting to turn the filter on. So that's what it sounds like with no filter. All right, let's try it again. A little bit less. Interesting. So turning the filter down actually muffles it more. So I might need to actually crank it up past 50% in order to get it to have more of a sharp hit. And Crusher says, what you just recorded, what's that? So what I recorded, let me turn it off. What I recorded was a BGM or spit snare, but I used what filter is this? Low pass filter. It's got a low pass filter effect over it, which is what's causing it to get distorted and muffled. But turning it down actually muffles it more. So I'm going to try and turn it up and see if we can get less variance on the snare so that it's not changing every single snare hit. So let me try that and we'll see what it sounds like. Okay, I actually like how that sounds. It's a little bit of variance in like the middle snare, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. It's just a little loud. So I'm gonna back off a bit and redo that, but exact same settings, and we'll slot it in. And I'll take a pause to explain the spit snare in a sec, Crusher, and we'll talk about it. Let's get this recorded on the rhythm first. And that's me forgetting to turn on filter again. There we go. That's what I wanted. All right, let's save this and then we will take a pause to talk about another snare type, one of my favorites. I say one of my favorites in reality, I like all the snares. It just depends on my mood which one I use. And so to Crusher's question about the spit snare, all right, it's one that sounds like a clap. It's the sharpest and most forceful of the outward snares, I think, compared to a PF or a outward K. The BGM is the strongest, I think. It's the one that sounds the sharpest, and usually it's the one that gets people's attention. Every time I've ever freestyled beatboxing in public with people, and I do the BGM, that's the first thing people are surprised by because it's a very, very unusual type of sound. Now, how you do it? How you do it is all lip pressure and air, and this is normally a breathing sound. You can do it with just mouth pressure, but when you're learning it, you're using lung power a little bit. And so you're creating the BGM snare by really tightly pressing your lips together and forcing a little bit of air out in a burst. And so here's how you start. If you force your lips together, almost like seal them, and then push air out of your mouth and let up on the pressure just a little bit to let a little air through, you're going to get a crackling sound. It's going to sound like it. I use this example a lot because this is what I've heard and I think it makes sense. It's that noise that babies make sometimes and they're making like lip noises. And so if you push that air out and get the and just feel where on your mouth feel where it feels and feel that kind of crackling pressure. Once you can do that, the BGM snare itself is just taking that and forcing the air out and clamping your lips down sharply instead of just letting it kind of crackle forever. And so you're pushing the air out in a short burst between your lips and then clamping down to cut it off. And so it goes from to, and then from there it's practicing getting that burst to be shorter and sharper and clamping down harder to cut it off. And it goes from to, and that's practice. BGM snares take a bit of work. They're not that clean and crisp when you start, but after you do it for a while, because the motion is much less complicated than some of the case snares, I think, you just have to practice getting that tightness and clamping your lips down and getting a burst. And then eventually you don't even need to use your lungs. You just use your mouth pressure and then you just do it in a burst and you get it short. That's the thing to focus on. Make it short and quick and then clamp down. So instead of go, make it short and then just use your lips to cut off the sound. Crusher says, if I'm being honest, I thought that snare was a case snare at first. It might have been why I thought I was not getting the right sound for the case snare. Ah, I see. Well, it's a good thing you asked because it's a different instrument altogether. Crusher says this one is going to take practice. It does, and I think it's easier to practice the BGM because it doesn't require you to do a lot of fancy things with your mouth. You just have to learn how to control your lips and get that tightness. And once you can get that burst short, even if it's not clean, just practice on tightening it up and making it shorter and sharper. And then what improves is your lip strength, which is actually pretty important for a lot of techniques in beatboxing, is lip strength, just like playing a brass or a woodwind instrument, right? Having strong lip muscles is going to help on a lot of techniques, especially once you get to lip rolls. But taking that sharpness and clamping down and getting them, once you can do that consistently, then here's how you practice. Okay, I'll give you a real simple drill. Practice with quarter notes. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have a metronome, and this is something I've mentioned before, one of my teachers that I studied under really pushed this. It's a good idea for beginners and intermediates and advanced people. Get a free metronome app and learn how to keep time with techniques as you're doing them. It'll improve your beatboxing a lot. And so for BGM, same thing for case snare too. Just set a simple BPM, just a 1, 2, 3, 4, and practice doing 1, 2, 3, 4 with the instrument. So BGM snare. It sounds elementary, I know, but trust me, being able to keep time is something people really need to learn on the beginning, especially if you don't have a background in music. like I didn't. Just as you're practicing getting the technique and keeping on rhythm, it'll help you a lot. You'll see a lot of improvement if you drill that way. And same thing for case snares, same tempo. Because it's teaching your mouth the muscle memory position to do the technique. Instead of having to think about it and reset, if you practice doing it consistently, even if it's not clean, and it probably won't be, you'll probably have the first snare be clean and then it's going to get muddy. But if you keep practicing on that rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4, eventually you'll be able to do 4 in a row and have it be clean, and then 5 in a row, then 6 in a row. And then over time, your ability to do those consistently will improve, and that's really good with a metronome. And I think it's like the Brenner one. There are a lot of free metronome programs that don't require you to pay. I have one on my phone. I can look it up and see what it's called. That'll probably help. Let's see. Soundbrenner. I'll put it in the chat. Soundbrenner, this one is a free program. It's used with, I think, one of their hardware peripherals for a metronome, but this one is just for your phone. And so we can demonstrate it here. Let's see. Oh, I had it set at 7/8. Why did I do that? I was probably trying to practice a 7/8 rhythm. We'll demonstrate this live on stream. You guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay, this is 130 beats PM. Let's go down to 20. And I'll make it a little bit louder and kind of put it near the mic. So this is going to be kind of weird, but it'll illustrate what I'm talking about. You folks should be able to hear it. And so this is a 4/4 rhythm set at 120 BPM. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the practice, this is a little bit faster than what I was illustrating before, but case snares, outward case snares like Crusher's talking about. Here's how you would practice it. Follow the clicking. And same thing for BGMs. Follow the same 4/4 at 120. Further up, Crusher says, so far I've been fairly good at beatboxing because I've done for the last 20 years passive learning and training, which is doing it absent-mindedly as a stim, which means I've gotten good at doing the basics without using my brain. Oh, okay. So it's really not just a complete ground up entry for you then. You've had a little bit of experience doing stuff like that. That's good. Crusher also says, as someone who's done orchestra for several years, learning how to work with a metronome would definitely be helpful. Again, it sounds elementary, but it definitely does help. And the fact that you can take this app that I just showed off and you can ratchet up the BPM and change the time signature. So 4/4 is pretty standard, right? Just 1, 2, 3, 4. You can practice your instruments on irregular rhythms too, which is even better practice for coming up with new ideas for patterns and routines. So let's say you wanted to do 3/4, and 3/4 has been a white whale when it comes to composing BGM tracks because I suck at composing things in 3/4. But that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? It's like a waltz tempo, I think. 1, 2, 3. I think that's 3/4. Anyway, you take your snares and same deal. It's forcing you to practice different rhythms and being consistent and being able to do them on demand with the muscle memory. I guarantee you. Well, okay. I'd be willing to bet money that if you do this for a week practicing your snares, you will see more improvement than if you didn't. Crusher says, I feel like it might be hard for you because it's an odd number. The thing is, I know rhythms, I just don't know the signatures. So I probably know a lot more complexity rhythms, but I just don't know them by their time signature. Like the waltz rhythm. Yeah, someone had to tell me, oh yeah, that's like a 3/4 rhythm. Like, oh, I didn't know that. I just know it's a waltz rhythm. Or like another one. What, I don't know what this one would be. Like a. That's not a 4/4. I don't think. It's either like a 5/4 or a 6/8. But that's another one I've been doing forever. I know that as a rhythm. I just don't know what the signature is. Don't ask me about time or key signatures because I'm not a classically trained musician, so I couldn't tell you. But actually, so we have it more of a empirical science thing. We can tell our metronome to go to 6/8 and see what it sounds like at 120, and then that answers the question, right? So okay, this is 6/8. 8 beats, total 6 on rhythm. Now see, I kind of understand how that works mechanically, but taking that and turning it into a beat is really difficult for me. It's actually easier for me to have someone say, here's what a 6/8 beat sounds like, and then for me to mimic it until I understand it and then create a variation using that same rhythm. That's easier than trying to do it by the numbers, which I'm sure infuriates classically trained music people, but what can you do? I'm a beatboxer. Crusher says, I got crap from my friends who did the Suzuki method when I had not learned that for when I was doing violin. I don't even know what the Suzuki method is. Again, I was in band, but it was decades ago. It was like 50 years ago. I was a trumpet player, and I cannot remember if that was a Raku Faktu. So if it's not, you get a free one. I used to play trumpet a long time ago. It's been so long that I can't read music anymore. But yeah, that's a good sidebar, Crusher. I hope that using a metronome will kind of synergize with your music background and give you some tools to kind of help you as you're learning beatbox sounds. Because again, it's the best practice that one of my favorite beatboxers really stressed in his lessons. This is again Kindo from Vegas, and I don't do it as much now unless I'm trying to do like speed training, but it's definitely a good tool to use. And that one I suggested is free, so might as well, right? Crusher says Suzuki method was like learning orchestral instruments starting from the age of 4 or 5. Ah, I see. I knew a lot of people who were forced to learn piano at a young age. I do not know how to play the piano. I use my synthesizer with moderate amounts of success, but I am not formally trained in piano. I don't know chords. So all of the melodies and harmonies that you hear on the stuff I make is done by noodling around and doing it by ear until I can hear things that are in tune, because like I don't know major chords, minor chords, or things like that, or like circle of fifths. I probably should study that, but I don't find it interesting, so instead it's all done by ear, which might be why some of the stuff might not be in tune. If you ever hear something I make and it sounds like dramatically out of tune, then it's because I didn't hear it correctly. Go figure. Crutcher says, I didn't start violin or guitar until I turned 13. I tried learning guitar too. I actually have a really nice electric guitar. It's a Japanese Stratocaster I bought from a coworker many years ago. It's currently in storage. It's in good condition. It was restrung a couple years ago too. But I got busy with a bunch of other things, and I would really need to take lessons for guitar. Crusher says, I heard there was a major chord that David played and it pleased God, or pleased the Lord, but I didn't learn that way, so I don't know God. Well, I'm sure God's not that picky. I guess I could play the ignorant card and just say everything was intentionally meant to be dissonant whenever I write music or compose. I probably shouldn't say write music. I don't write anything. And I'm sure people out in the music community will call me out eventually, but the stuff that I do on stream and for things like the Lost Kingdom project, I didn't write anything. I can't write sheet music. So it was all done again by ear and by experimenting around with things recorded using the loop station, which is handy because I can take something and record it and listen to how it loops and see, is it on beat? Is it synced up with rhythms? Is it synced up with keys? And does it sound like it's in tune versus, recording it and then it's in a vacuum? I can hear it played back over and over, and then that's how I sync things up. Probably not the most efficient way to do it, but it made it a lot easier to say, okay, I'm going to lay down a bass line first. So this is sort of the key, the bass line is the key of the song. I want to put some high end melodies on there. So I'm listening to the bass playback, record something, and if it sounds jarringly out of tune, then I redo it and I mess around with the melody and notes until it sounds like it's in tune. And that's how I created all the tracks. So again, probably not the most professional way to do it, but it works. Crusher says, I like your compositions. Oh, thanks. Again, Lost Kingdom was a big experiment. I hadn't done anything like that before, but it ended up being a lot of fun. As a person who really likes old JRPGs and the soundtracks to said RPGs, trying to create something inspired by that was a lot of fun. And once this next project is more or less getting towards completion, I have a lot of ideas for another one. It's not going to be Lost Kingdom 2. It'll be something different, but a similar style. And hopefully by the time I get around to doing that, I'll have learned a lot more and I can make even more kind of complex compositions and things put together. But it was fun. I enjoyed working on that project, and I enjoyed working with Wazi. Despite everything she'll tell you and everything she says, she's a very professional person when it comes to her commissions. And that was a big commission for both of us to handle, and she did it. Crusher says, look, you've inspired me to get back into actively learning beatboxing, so I bow my head to you, Master Raku. Oh, don't call me Master. I don't deserve that title. I haven't been doing this long enough. I can be your beatbox senpai, because that doesn't imply any sort of credentialing. But that is very flattering, Crusher. Again, I don't personally do it for any gratification, but if people are motivated and inspired to get into this awesome art form through anything I say or do, then that is great. That's fantastic. It's part of content creation that I really strive for. So good. I hope to hear some routines and other stuff from you in the future as you keep learning. Okay, so it's been very good discussion. Let's keep working on the beat. Let's see, we're coming up on 2 hours, but again, I'm not on a schedule, so we can keep going and try and at least complete one of these things today. So let's turn the beat back on. We added the filter. We added the filter to the BGM snare. That's what spurred the sidebar, which again is good. You don't have to be sorry for any tangents or sidebars, Crusher. That's the point of these streams. If I didn't want to talk about it, stuff along the way, then I wouldn't have a mic. I would just be sitting here making random music stuff. So again, anytime questions come up from anyone in chat, you can stop me at any point. Crusher says, one day when I get my stuff together, I'd love to perform for you. Well, one thing, okay, so this is related to what you're talking about, Crusher. One thing I am building into the Discord, which now that Lost Kingdom is done, I'm probably going to make that my next immediate priority to finish and then just launch for everybody because I've been dragging my feet. I know. I'm sorry it's taken so long. There will be a section of the Discord for Beatbox voice chats. Okay. And I haven't quite figured out any structure for how I want to use it, but it's going to basically be a way for, like, maybe if I'm practicing and I want to just do like a public practice session, then I might jump in there and just be there if people want to pop in, listen to what I'm doing, or like do like a jam session, which has been a thing on other Beatbox Discords that I've been on. And I don't want to pressure people into feeling like they have to do that. But if people who are learning want to get together and have kind of like an open forum in real time with us talking, that's going to be what that section of the Discord's for. And maybe further down the road, as we sort of develop everything, we can do kind of like open mic nights. Maybe we plan on like a weekend when the timing is good and just jump into the voice chat and have kind of like a real-time discussion on Beatbox stuff instead of just on the jam streams. And so I'm setting up a spot to be able to do that in the Discord. And that would be a good, informal, just amongst the community. No one's going to judge. And I will make sure that nobody judges what anybody does as part of that participation, to just hang out, talk beatboxing, and kind of practice. And so that's something I'm working on. And it might kind of suit the needs that you're talking about, Crusher. All right. So let's listen to our beat and let's move on to bass lines. What's the BPM on this one? 122? This rhythm, the way we've constructed it here, would actually work really well with a drop. It's very simple. We could think about that further down the road. But now we gotta think about a bass line, something that's going to kind of pair well with this forward driving rhythm. We could do something that follows kind of the quarter note, the 1, 2, 3, 4, or we can do something that is got a progression that's staggered off of that, so it's not just following the same rhythm as the drums and the percussion. And so I kind of want to fiddle around with both. So I'm gonna turn guitar to bass on and just try and record a couple, like at least one attempt, see how it sounds, and see if I want to change the notes or progression. Because I have an idea, and let's see if we can flesh it out into something that works. So I won't be able to talk, but I'll turn everything back on the mic after I record it. Interesting. I'm trying to sync this one up so that it goes a little bit longer before it has to recycle back to the top, and it's cutting off at the loop a little bit weird. So give me a second to try and figure that out. I figured out what was causing the problem. I was cutting it off mid-loop. Because the rhythm is more than one bar, I have to account for 2 bars if I want it to cycle through a full repetition. Otherwise, it cuts off in the middle, and then when it re-loops, it's on like a weird delay. Crusher says, I'm sobering up myself, so I'm enjoying the music. Oh, that's good. Hopefully this is good. Good background noise and ambiance. Crusher asks, is this going to be on a BGM soundtrack? Because this is fire. Yeah, so I kind of talk a little bit about what we do whenever we're on these jam streams messing around with the BGM stuff, and I'm asking for, ideas from chat and whatnot. These tracks, once I finalize and record them down the road, are what go into the BGM collections. And once I have enough of them recorded, that's when I release the entire collection. And so, yes, whatever we end up creating by the end is going to be part of a release, and you can listen to it on streaming platforms and whatnot. Crusher says, I'm not too drunk, only had 4 beers. Doesn't sound like a lot. I don't drink beer, so I'd have no frame of reference. Okay, so before we move on to high-end melody stuff to pair with the rhythm and bass line, I like the way the bass line sounds. It took me a second to get the duration, but I'm going to save this before I overwrite anything. Here's some interesting potential we have with this particular setup. I'm going to up the rhythm a little so you can hear this. By using beat repeat and only having it apply to the rhythm, we can do things like double time and half the rhythm and have the bass line stay the same. And we can turn it on for the bass too. But let's say we wanted to switch up the rhythm but keep the bass line the same. This is just one track level effect that we're turning on. And we can even go faster if we wanted just the rhythm to sound like it's building up to a drop and the bass line is unchanged. Now if we turn the effect on for the bass too, then now the bass is also using the same kind of half rhythm. And that's how we would construct a drop. Crusher says, I had to rediscover my tolerance after my transition because estrogen gets alcohol into your system faster and therefore reduces tolerance. They also started a new med that affects my tolerance. I see. That makes sense. Knowing all the things that affect things like alcohol tolerance, or even if you can have alcohol, is pretty important so you don't make yourself incredibly sick. A good friend of mine has lupus, and when on lupus drugs cannot have any alcohol, or it causes incredible sickness and pain, which sucks. I always feel a little guilty whenever we're out and about and said friend can't drink anything, has to watch the rest of us. Crusher said, I stopped doing hard liquor during the pandemic because I had nearly 2 liters of vodka in 2 days. That's a lot of vodka. That is what some might consider an extreme amount of vodka in that short amount of time. All right. So let's think about what we're going to pair with the bass line and rhythm we've got. Let's see, we could try the chime, or I guess it's like a high synth that uses filter with granular delay. Crusher says, yeah, it makes me a little sleepy because I'm on mood stabilizers. I was like, yeah, this could quickly turn into a habit. I unfortunately have an addictive personality. Well, it's good to recognize that and kind of limit things that are going to be a problem. You know, I know people that have that tendency as well, and so they tend to just avoid things that could, drop them down the rabbit hole and get them into trouble, whether it's, substances like alcohol or even things like gambling. I definitely think being able to recognize that and put the brakes on before you get into trouble is really important. But yeah, that's definitely valid. Crusher also says, I really like BGM streams because it makes me think of how I would add to the song, which improves my overall routines. Well, like I said before, these BGM brainstorming sessions are meant to be collaborative. So if you have ideas about things to add or change with the tracks that we're doing as I'm fiddling around with stuff, make sure you mention them in chat, because I tend to bounce stuff off you folks, but it's also meant to be kind of like a collaborative session. So if you think you can think of something instrument-wise or something to add, we can look at that and see. It's one thing I can't really do, just to give you an idea. I can't go and alter things like a recorded rhythm. I can add things on top, but I can't go back and change it without re-recording it from scratch. Same thing with the bass. I can add things to it on top of it, but I can't go back and extend it out or shorten it, because it's a single loop that's repeating. But I can add new instrument tracks on. I've got 5 total. I'm only using 2 on the loop station. And so let's see if we can come up with something for a high-end synth. All right, let me turn my mic back on and explain what I was messing around with here. The that weird kind of tonal distortion is the ring modulator, which creates kind of like a ringing robot-esque voice. There's an actual robot function that works differently, but I was trying to see if I could have combined that with filter to create kind of like a high synth that would be more melodic. It's kind of finicky, and the way I have the filter settings, it's set to be a different type of instrument, which I'll try and do next. But Crusher says, so here's the thing, I'm good at clicks with my tongue, but I don't know what they're called as far as beatboxing terms go. Oh, if you're talking about like that's just a click. It's called a click in beatboxing. It can be used as a filler sound or even a snare. And if you have a good control over clicks, it's another tool in the beatboxing arsenal. A lot of people are really good with clicks. And if you use a metronome and practice on getting your clicks faster, you can do some fun stuff too. Like, let's see, what's the fastest I can do clicks? Maybe. There are people out there, I think from France, a dude named Wawad has the most ridiculously fast click patterns you ever heard. It gets pretty crazy if you just practice it enough. Crusher says, Banani just got an electric ukulele, and I'd love to hear a collab between you two. Oh, interesting. That could be fun. Crusher says, no, it's more forceful, and I have to record it to explain it properly. Oh, okay. Chances are it's some sort of click variation. If it's done using your tongue, like using tongue pressure on the roof of your mouth. Like when you make a clopping noise with your tongue, like popping off the roof of your mouth. Oh, are you talking about like a block click? Something like... That's a slightly different type of click. Tongue click, I think is what they call that. Yeah. That's actually... Yeah. That's a variation. I think they call it tongue clicks, as opposed to the... Now, what you can do later, and I haven't practiced this in a while, but you can use a throat, a kind of like a throat pressure. I'd have to think about how to explain this, but you can combine that with like a throat pop, and you get a deeper, like hollow tongue click. It sounds like... And you do that by opening your throat up and using the back of your tongue to get more of like a pop, in addition to just slapping your tongue downwards. And interestingly enough, if you can do that, you're already halfway there to learning regular clops, which is not using your tongue to seal to the roof of your mouth and popping it down. Just smacking your tongue to the floor of your mouth is how you get the clops. That takes a lot of practice, but if you can do that, it's a really fun technique for adding in rhythm sounds too. But it takes a ton of practice because you have to build a ton of muscle strength underneath your tongue, which has no strength by itself. But if you just practice slapping the floor of your mouth with your tongue, over time, that's how you get the... I don't use that enough because I kind of suck at it, but you can do some really interesting rhythms doing kind of like... Let me turn this off. Doing kick rhythms and adding in clops and hollow clops by opening your throat, and you might get something like... Mine's not loud, that's why I suck at it. But if you practice, again, slapping the floor of your mouth with your tongue, over time it develops an actual audible noise, and that's how you're getting that. And then you open your throat up like you're hollowing it, and that's how you get that low echoey one that sounds like... It's probably really soft, I know, but getting that muscle memory takes forever. But I think maybe a month of practicing, I can get an actual audible sound instead of just a wet smack. That's fun. People do some bananas things with clop, pop, and click patterns. People do things like a pop, like a mixing that up with the hollow clop. So you might get something like. I'm not really good at it, but there's a pro from Japan named Kohei who has insane click clop technicality patterns. I should show that off sometime. That dude's a monster. And I'm pretty sure he's like a third my age. Anyway, getting back to our techno adjacent beat. Let me see if I can turn on the chime synth and see what we can do with that. I use that one a lot, and so I kind of want to not get stuck in the habit of using that one, but we might be able to set a melody and then try and duplicate that with another instrument. Crusher says that the clicking noise I've been doing is like slamming the top of my tongue against my teeth. I think would be the most accurate way of describing it. Tough for me to visualize what it looks like. I'd have to hear what it sounds like to try and pinpoint where it comes from. Because doing like a tongue click, where you're going from the top of your mouth to the bottom using suction, it's not really hitting your teeth. The tip of your tongue is sort of brushing the bottom of the inside ridge of your lower row of teeth, but it's mostly just tongue and tongue pressure going from top to bottom. But I should practice my clicks and clops more, especially the hollow kick clop. That one's fun. To me, that's the most interesting of all the different variations. You can't do it quickly, really. Maybe you could if you practice it enough, but using it like a snare, so something like it's very different sounding. I do like that one. Crusher says, I'll try and record it after stream and send it to you. Sure, feel free. That might help me in figure out how the sound works, and I'd be interested to hear if I can equate that to something in beatboxing and explain it that way. All right, let's turn this back on. I'm going to turn on the combination filter and granular delay for this chime and mess around with it, and then I'll come back because I can't talk when I have these settings on. So let's see what happens. All right, let me turn my mic back on. Crutcher says on topic of clicks, the clicks could accentuate the bass line. Well, we can look at adding some click effects to the rhythm too, or even separately. So I gotta make sure I don't turn this up too loud because it can get really obnoxious to hear this high-pitched sound. But using the filter combined with the granular delay effects creates this like resonant high synth chime, which is really neat. I've used this on a lot of songs because it's just fun. But this rhythm that we have here would be probably something that I bring in and out. I wouldn't have it go through the whole song because it would get kind of annoying. But this is your car alarm when you leave your door open is going off. But one thing that we can do that can make this interesting, we can reverse it, and it changes the way it sounds because it's playing the entire loop in reverse. It sounds like... Problem is, because it's a little bit different of a rhythm, it doesn't sync up exactly when it's playing it in reverse because it's kind of drawing it and pulling it back. And so I don't think we could really use that as a viable thing for reverse, but it does sound interesting. And we got a stretch and hydrate from Sour Lad. All right. So I think that's functional, but again, this is something I would bring in and out. I wouldn't have this going the whole time. But it's really kind of imprecise getting the chime to change pitch, because basically we're setting the granular delay effect on one input, and then we turn filter on the other, and then I'm changing the intensity of the filter effect, which, because of the combination of settings, it's causing the chime to change pitch. And it's not exact, like step by step. I have to kind of ballpark as I'm changing the pitch, and that's what makes it a little bit difficult to control. But it's a neat sound. So we can keep that on there, and then let's see what else we can add. We got two open tracks. But what about messing around with clicks? We could put it on a separate track, that way we can turn the click layer, as it were, on and off. What if we did clicks with reverb? So what we've got is we have a click pattern that comes in the middle, then it goes away and leaves some open measures, and then comes back in on the next repeat. And we can also take the repeat and try and get that to loop if we were to do like a repeating part of the rhythm using this effect. I wonder if we can... Yeah, we could. If we capture it at the right section and we tell it to repeat. I think I would want the bass to not be subject to the repeat, though. Interesting. I kind of like having that as an effect that comes and goes the way it's structured. Good idea, Crusher. I don't know if I duplicated exactly what you were talking about, but throwing in that click pattern does sort of add some variance to the rhythm. If we bring in the chime. Crusher says, I sent the tongue clicks I was talking about to you on Discord just now. Oh, okay. Let me save this. Here's what I can do. I can mute my loop for just a minute while I listen to the recording, and then we can talk about it if you're comfortable with me doing that. I need to make sure my feedback isn't being weird. All right, so let me mute my audio, and then I will see what you got, and we can talk about it. Okay, we're back. That's interesting. I can't tell. I might have to listen to it a little bit closer using like my headphones at a high volume, but I can't place exactly what type of click variation that is just by the noise, because it doesn't sound sharp like regular a regular kind of back of the tongue click, but it also doesn't sound quite as not echoey, but it doesn't sound quite as rounded as like an actual forceful tongue click. It's kind of in between. I'll have to think about that. That's interesting. I might have to ask for some specifics on how to duplicate that sound, because it sounds different from all the clicks I know. But thanks for sending that, Crusher. That's interesting. Let's see. It almost sounds like a clop, but it's not as hollow like a. Yeah, it doesn't quite sound as echoey like a clop. Interesting. More research required. But yeah, thanks for sending that. Okay, let's turn the track back on. We've got four total tracks. We've got a rhythm, a bass line, a synth, and then a supplemental click track that we can use as kind of like a additional thing to kind of pair with the rhythm, the drums, as it were. And so let's kind of think of how the song would be arranged and performed, and then we will kind of wrap up for today. I know I said I wanted to get through more than one of these, but I'm glad we spent time talking about questions and technique stuff mixed in too. So there's no quota. I don't have to get a certain amount of these done every time. I'd rather us get one really interesting track done than spam through a whole bunch of simple ones. And so I'm thinking we start with the bass line for this one. And while we're sort of piecing together the structure of how this would be performed in a way, I tasked chat with helping me come up with names for these. And so for Crusher and everyone else that's tuning in, if you have suggestions for what to call this one based on the instruments and things we've set up, then feel free to drop them, because a lot of times I will take chat suggestions, and that's what the BGM track gets called. And usually it's appropriate with whatever we're styled or instruments. Maybe something to do with clicks. I welcome your ideas. But if we did a baseline intro and we did something like, and have this repeat for maybe 1 or 2 bars. And then we bring the rhythm in. Like fade it in. Or bring in the clicks. We drop out the bass. Bring in the bass with a chime. Fade out the chime. Fade out the clicks. And maybe now we think about mixing up the rhythm. Back. And so the idea is that rather than have like a part A and a part B to the track, there are subtle adjustments, things like the rhythm that get altered, and the bass line stays the same, and then the chime and the clicks come in and out. So that's kind of what I envisioned for how this one would be structured. What happens if we reverse the bass line? Oh, interesting. I wonder if I start them at the same time. The reverse version of the bass line sounds kind of cool, but I don't know if it fits for the song. Crusher says, Ad Astra Latin for To the Stars. I really like Ad Astra for a name because this song gives me space travel vibes. Okay, I like it. Oh, I see. It's because of the long lead out on the bass line sustain note. When it's reversed, it's playing that on the front end, obviously. And so that's interesting, and it sounds kind of cool, but I don't know if I'd want that as part of the song. I just wanted to see what it sounded like. And I also don't know if I'd want to structure a drop. This thing doesn't really go hard enough to warrant a drop, but we could do things like change the rhythm, like halftime it. And that's just a toggle on and off with beat repeat. Very powerful effect at the track level. And if we think about how we would outro this one, maybe we drop the rhythm out for a little bit. maybe we end with just an outro, a few bars of the rhythm by itself, and then that sort of plays the track out. That could work for first structure. I kind of like the idea of adding in the rhythm tweaks and bringing in the clicks, bringing in the chime, and then taking them out and having them kind of vary up through the track instead of having, 4 bars sound, 4 bars sound, 4 bars sound. I think it's better if we bring stuff in and out. One, because I think the chime would grind people and grate on them if I played the entire song. But I'm gonna write this down. I like your suggestion for Ad Astra, so we're gonna put that on the list. I have to write these down because I will forget, since it's usually a decent stretch of time between when we do these on stream and when I actually record them. BGM ideas. I think we are up to 5 of the BGM tracks. Usually I'll wait till we get maybe 12 or between 12 and 15 of them before I consider that enough for a release. So we'll see. Sometimes we get more than one of these done on stream. Sometimes we don't. It purely depends on how much we have to talk about. And it was a good discussion today, so I got no complaints. So I think we'll call that. It's hard for me to tell exactly where our total runtime is. I think we're at almost 3 hours. Started at 2 my time. It is almost 5. So I think we will call that good and wrap up. I'm glad we had a chance to talk through all of the different beatbox related stuff, and this particular track we did, I'm gonna save this too before I forget. This particular beatbox track is neat, this BGM one. I might tweak some things in between now and then when I record, but the general vibe and what we have here is not going to change. And so at some point in the future, there'll be a BGM collection 3.0 and Ad Astra will be on there. And so shout outs to Crusher for coming up with the name and helping suggest instruments and things for the track itself. Crusher says, "Oh wow, it's 7:43 p.m. for me. Are you in CST or something?" I'm in Pacific. I'm on the West Coast. It is Pacific time for me. So I'm 3 hours. It must be Eastern time. Based on where I know where you live, that makes sense. Well, yeah, let's see. Before we wrap up, let me see who's online that we can raid. Wow, no one I know is online? That's rare. I think Wazzy is Wazzy streaming today? Her schedule was different this week. Oh yeah, she's streaming in an hour. Oh, Guarded Phone versus Crew, huh? I might have to pop in for that. Okay, well, interestingly enough, for the first time in what feels like an eternity, no one I know is online to raid. Crusher, if you know any cool VTubers that we can go and spread the love to, then feel free to suggest one. Otherwise, we can just wrap up. I don't need to raid someone every single stream, but I generally like doing that. If you know any small VTuber streamers, then you can drop a name in chat and I'll look them up. And if not, we can always wrap up. That's cool. Crusher says, Iconic's on the West Coast and I'm EST. No, Crusher says, only people I'm following is Iron Mouse, but she's big time. Yeah, I follow Iron Mouse too, and she's the only one of the people I know that's on my list. And she would not even, blink at probably a 2-person raid. That's okay. I usually try and share things around people I know, but that's fine. We don't have to raid someone today. So let's see. We'll go ahead and go to outro. And we will call call that a stream for today. I need to figure out the schedule for next week. I think we'll be back on Tuesday and Thursday. I think I'm only going to be able to do 2 days next week because of some stuff going on the weekend. But what we're going to be doing next week is probably... I know Killer 7 for sure because it's been like almost 2 weeks since we played that. So Killer 7 will probably be on the first stream, whenever that is. And I got to figure out what I'm doing for the other one. I think we'll be alternating something else instead of Armored Core this week. I got to look. Crusher asked, is this the Lost Kingdom outro? No. This is the JRPG song from Lufia 2. I think I sent you this one. I think it was you that asked me. Yeah, this is the one from Lufia 2. I really like that song, so I haven't bothered to change it. It's also synced up BPM-wise, but... Oh yeah, you should definitely check out Lufia 2, Crusher. It's a really cool game. One of the classics. And if you play through it, then you'll have something to talk about with me and Matt, because we both like that game a lot. But alright, we will wrap up for today, so thanks again for hanging out, folks. And I will see you in the next stream. Have yourselves an awesome evening. Catch you later.